Think about when you called me and I had just left to come home for Easter. And where I live in Boston, it takes probably like 5 minutes to get on the highway. And I hadn't even made it 5 minutes and just started sobbing in the car. And so this was the first time that I was coming home. So I live in Boston, but back to Pennsylvania since my grandmother had died in December. And, there's a lot of emotions there. And I felt like I knew what I was getting into. Like I knew I would feel sad and upset. But I started crying, not because I was sad, but because I missed her yelling at me. And I think this is like the most true to her that we could really be, because I left at 3 p.m. on Good Friday.
And so 3 p.m. on Good Friday. Yeah.
And I could just hear her in the back of my head that it was stupid. And it was one of those things where, like, I kind of knew it was dumb. Like, I kind of knew that, like, 3 p.m. on Good Friday to drive home for Easter probably was not the time to do it. But it was just the way my work schedule had worked out. I was traveling a whole bunch, and I was staying home like a little bit longer. So that extra day in my apartment, I mean, this I also got from her, the extra day in my apartment to do my laundry and clean, and because God forbid you go anywhere and you don't scrub your bathroom.
You want it to be clean when you get back.
You do. And I can't, I've tried. You actually can't. That's genetic. I'm pretty sure you can't get rid of that. Mm-hmm. And so, I did all of those things, and it just ended up being 3:00, and I am sitting on the Mass Pike in the tunnel underneath the city, and I am just uncontrollably sobbing. And I called you, and you're like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "I'm fine."
Yeah, as you're crying. Yeah.
And not like cute, like, oh, like here's a couple of tears. Like this is like full on, like in the bathroom, like maybe by yourself crying. And
it's funny when you talk about crying, because I remember when I dropped you off your sophomore year to Northeastern, like I think I cried like 3 states home, you know what I mean? Massachusetts, Connecticut, so those of you who don't know, I live in Pennsylvania. So, I think probably a lot of people have cried across those states.
Down 84, right? Like you just, if the construction won't get you, some, family emotions will, right? So, and there were a couple of things when I think about that drive that it really was like I sat in my car, like ready to do it and just had to face, which one was I wasn't getting her semi-passive-aggressive phone calls that were like, where are you, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, she was waiting for you.
She was. Every time. And so, but also there were stretches of road where she would call me, like there were different hours, and she took it upon herself to entertain me as we drive. And
well, she was so familiar with the drive because she had, summered in Maine, and wintered in Pennsylvania. So she did know where you were at. If you said you were, at this place on 84, she's like, oh yeah. And it'll be this long for you to get home. So it's definitely something she could relate to.
It was. And, she would tell me, what was going on with the news, and I don't stay up on the news as much as she did. So she would, be my own little personal, like, newscaster. She talked to me about the weather, and she would pay attention to the weather for what's supposed to happen for me my whole drive home. And then she would wait, and it didn't matter that I was going to get home at 10:30 at night or 11 o'clock. Sometimes I could placate that with a phone call. But when I pulled into our driveway and you looked across the street, that's where she lived at a personal care home. Her light was always on until I called her and I told her that I got home. And whether I went home or whether I went to go see her that night at 10:30 at night, because she was a night person. Like, she definitely
would have been up, yeah.
Would have been, like, if I got tired, like, at the end of that drive, I could have called her. She was waiting up, and she would talk to me until I got home, to make sure that I was okay and that I wasn't tired. But if I didn't go that night, if I wasn't over there by 8 o'clock the next morning, and she was not a morning person, but I better be over there with my coffee at 8 a.m. ready to talk to her. And so I knew that would be hard. But the being upset that she wasn't there to yell at me, I have to say, was like a new version of that emotion. And so, and I think about, my name's Cortney, and I'm really here with my mom, Julie, to talk about caring for my nan who passed away. And, it was really hard. And so, we work in the elder law space. So my mom's an elder law attorney and has been, for over 20 years. And, we knew what we were doing, and it was still really hard. And so, we're going to talk today about firsts. And so we had a lot of them all at one time. So the first time I drove home, the first major holiday, because even though she passed before Christmas, I don't really consider that because she was still so much a part of that holiday. So she started preparing for Christmas on the Friday after Thanksgiving. She was ready to go. And so, we both have had birthdays, we had Mother's Day. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and why it's hard, and that some people have good intentions, but they say stupid shit.
Yeah, they do.
And they're trying to be nice, and they're trying to help. But, sometimes there's nothing that somebody can say. It's just really freaking hard.
It is. And I think, this podcast is, called Hey Woman, because that's what we called my mom. Hey woman, how are you? But our hope for you is, maybe somebody has said something stupid to you, it's okay to laugh about it. It's okay. And if you're supporting somebody, maybe you won't say something stupid.
Just think twice before you send the text. Would this make me upset? If the answer is yes, delete it and try something else.
Yeah. It's so important that we know how to support people and how to be supportive. But the firsts are really, really hard. And part of this is walking through grief. And so Mom did pass away in December, and grief really sucks.
It does.
Like you're talking about, you're driving home and it kind of just sneaks up on you in odd sort of ways. And not that you didn't know that the first time coming home would be hard, but maybe not for what reason. But the reality of it is that you have to walk through grief and feel that pain, or you don't get through it. And so you have to hit these things head on in some ways. And you talked about driving home, and for me, Easter wasn't Easter. It just didn't feel quite the same. I felt like I was going through the motions. Like, you know what to do. You go to church, you get dressed, brunch.
You toss a couple eggs in the field,
Yeah, absolutely. Make the ham, her drunken ham, which we cannot possibly give the recipe on here.
She would die.
Well, honestly, I'm sure something would happen to us. I'm sure. But she had this very famous ham that she made, and I make that ham. And, this year it was interesting. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I just said to my husband, I'm not making ham this year. I didn't think it was necessary because we were going to my sister-in-law. So just a busy year this year, and the way things worked out, I thought, well, we don't really need a ham. And now I wonder, when I look back, was that just that I didn't want to face, doing the ham, we did need the ham. Luckily, my husband kind of put his foot down, and he doesn't often. So when he does, I'm like, oh, shit, he wants a ham.
Well, and not just a ham. We had a 15-pound ham.
We did.
We went from no ham to a very large ham.
Well, that may have been about the fact that I didn't think about it until, it was kind of too late. So we didn't have a lot of options. But I think even in that, when I look back, I wasn't really kind of consciously doing it, but it was just like, we don't need to do that this year. I don't know what I thought we were going to eat, because we were having brunch with my sister-in-law, and there was still dinner, and so that was hard. It was hard, and then doing the drunken ham was probably kind of what I needed, because I needed to do that and go through that. And so I think that's important for people to know how they're dealing with it.
I think too with Easter is, I maybe naively thought it wouldn't be as hard because I don't associate her as much with Easter. So like Christmas was a big deal to Nan.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time with Christmas with Nan, like getting ready and different things like that. And so we go up to my Aunt Kim's, my dad's sister, for brunch. And usually we would just go home. And I would go.
But Aunt Kim would have invited her.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes, as she got older, she declined to come just for mobility reasons. And I think it was nice too. She would, have a little bit more of a quiet morning, and then we would go see her. And it wasn't, it was just so much a part of my routine. Like I remember standing, at my aunt's and thinking about like we were getting ready to leave, and it was like, gosh, like, what am I going to go do? Like, I would have went to go see her. We would have watched a movie, or I would have shown her my Easter basket, or, something like that.
Yeah, like, what do you do with that time? Because you would have rushed back to go do that.
I took a nap.
Well, I think that's a good choice.
Honestly, the Celtics were on. I watched the Celtics game, and then I took a nap with the dog, and I think that's okay. And I think, going into the first, the advice that I would give to people is you should have a plan. And you and I didn't leave Easter separately, which I think is important. We would have left together to go see Nan. And my sister may have come with us. Now, my dad's family likes to play cards, and sometimes they do that. But, you and I left at the same time. And it's not that we did the same thing when we got home, but, not doing something by yourself and finding somebody to spend that day with or fill that time. And you can think that, this holiday wasn't as big of a deal to them, or, it's okay. Like, I'm prepared. When you're looking at the clock and it's time to go to what you would have done, something that's been so routine, it's important to have a plan for how you're going to fill the time.
Yeah, and I think you're so right about that, Court. And I think, too, we didn't kind of do it consciously, but we kind of checked in with each other, like, what are you doing? And I encourage people to do that, or reach out to somebody that you need, like you need to do something different, or you need to be able to leave and not be there. Like, so for me, I knew that I didn't want to stay and play cards, which is something I would have usually liked to do. But I knew that I could only be around people so long. And so I needed kind of an escape route, if you will. And that's nothing against, the people that we were with, of course. But just like knowing that, I didn't want to talk about it, and I needed to be able to come home. And because you talked to me about it, I was like, okay, we're on the same page here. And I'd even encourage people, if you don't feel like you have somebody that's on the same page, ask somebody to be on that same page with you, have that plan, because sometimes people are feeling things and they might be able to get out of somebody some support if they just ask for it, I've been married to Cortney's dad for over 30 years, and I learned really early in my marriage that if I wanted something, I had to ask for it, Now, please know, that did tick me off when I was younger. I was like, how can he not know? But he didn't, right? And so I could get upset about that. But what I did know is that if I could articulate to him what I needed, he'd likely, try to give it to me. And just, I think that's true of most people. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we sit and we think, why didn't they do that for me? And I think when you're going through grief like this, like you said, Court, you have to have a plan. And if you don't think somebody's going to support you or do what you need, then you have to ask them. Give them the opportunity to show up for you, even if they haven't in the past. Because I think, my hope for you is that they would.
Well, I think it comes back to, like, people have really good intentions. Like, people don't, walking through grief is really hard, and people try to help you in the best way you can, but people process it differently. Like, you and I both wanted to go home and take a nap separately, with our respective dogs, and we were both very happy with that.
We were happy with our choice.
But some people would have rather have stayed, surrounded by people.
Absolutely.
And, they should be true to that. And just because we decided to leave Easter, my dad's family, they're fantastic, and they were all really close with Nan. Like, we were a family
Yeah.
that weren't necessarily split on sides. And they, definitely would have done anything that we needed that day. But when I think about Easter too, one thing that we always did for the moms and the grandmothers was, buying a flower. So you talk about dad, and this is just one example of like, he just didn't think about it. So, Saturday morning I was driving to town and I had to go run an errand or something, and he called and asked me to pick up the flowers. And for him, I like to do that. So I
Right.
actually think he was trying to be nice to me. Like, he knows that, like, I just got home last night. He knows I was going to town. I could go get the flowers, and I actually really enjoy picking them out. And it
When he probably figured you'd do a good job.
Yes. And it's funny when there's kind of a science to the flowers. Like, it sounds silly, but Graham really likes yellow. So
Yes.
you always get Grammy a yellow flower. Nan always liked blues, so you always did like a blue flower, and we tried to get like a hanging basket or something so she could put it outside, so when she walked out of her door at the personal care home that she lived at, she could see it, and she,
And smell it.
and smell it. And so her flower was usually bigger, and it was always something just a little bit different each year. Like, we tried to find like something, a potted plant or something inside.
You did a good job this year. I really liked
Thank
mine.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. So, I go into Wegmans and I picked up Graham's yellow flower, and then they had these neat potted plants that I picked up for you. And I'm sitting there with 2 flowers in my arms, and I, again, just started crying. And so, like, God only knows what these poor people thought in Wegmans. Like, the flower girl's, like, looking at me like, what is wrong with her? It was really hard just to buy 2 flowers. And it wasn't something that Dad thought about. Like, he
Right.
wasn't trying to be mean. He actually thought he was doing something nice. And so I went and I was like, well, I could buy a 3rd flower, right? Like, I could have bought
Right.
Nan's flower. And I just didn't. And to be honest with you, I don't even know why I didn't. But it was
Right.
just like too many things. And I was like, so I just got my flowers and I cried and I brought them home. And I looked at Dad and I said, that was really hard. And he said, oh my God, I didn't even think about it. But I think the thing is that he then, for Mother's Day, so Mother's Day, is the next holiday a couple weeks later, he went and bought Graham's flower by himself. And I think he did that so that my sister didn't have to buy 2 flowers and not 3. So again,
Right.
another holiday where we would have bought the flowers. And so it's kind of an example of, asking for something or just looking at him. I wasn't upset at him.
Right. No. But
But
he needed to know.
that it was really hard to do, and that next year that could be the same thing. So even though it's not the first time I'm doing it, it's still something to be conscious of. And so next year, God knows he won't remember, but but
Poor man.
but like I'll at least, like, I mean, he remembered a month later, so I feel like we're doing pretty good. But I'll be able to say to him, like, remember last year that was really hard, and he'll just come with me. And I think it's about asking for what you want, but sometimes you don't know. You don't know what's going to be hard. Like, I was just going to buy flowers.
Yeah. And sometimes I think you don't even think things are going to be hard.
Right.
For me, that was my birthday. Like, so, obviously, like, so my birthday was between Easter and Mother's Day. And, my mom always liked birthdays, it was always really important. Even when she was really, really sick, I would sit and make out the cards to the kids. And, again, a thing that you could be irritated about, or you could be like, okay. But like, she was at the point where sometimes she couldn't go get the cards. So it was not okay just to go get a card and bring it. I had to get 3 cards so she could actually choose the card that we were going to give to the grandchild. And so, but when my birthday, came around, I know like your dad was probably because of the flower incident.
Right. He a little more aware of what was going on.
Yeah. So, he's trying to be helpful. Like, what do I want for my birthday? Like, what do I want to do? And, I really do. I mean, God love him. I think when we think back of like, he's trying to be helpful. He doesn't really know what to do or how to be helpful. But so, asking like, what do I want? And I know he was really frustrated, but it was just like, I don't know. And you know what? I didn't want to think about it. Like,
Right.
You know what I mean? Because like it was, so close after Easter. It's like, I didn't want to think about it. And so, my birthday was like on a Wednesday or Thursday. And, I know it was like Saturday, Sunday, and Donald's like, he's like saying, what do you want to do? I don't know. Like, and he's like, well, and why don't you? And I really don't. And I just said to him, I don't care. And sometimes when you say that to somebody that you love, they can think you're being flippant or like upset about something. And I really wasn't. I just really didn't care. And so, so then finally, like the day before, I was like, you know what? I really want to go out. I want my brother to be there. That was, and please know that wasn't anything against our nuclear family, but it's just Buddy and I.
Right.
And that was the easiest way to have I'm going to start crying. That was the easiest way for me to have a piece of mom there. And I didn't put that together until the night before. And because your dad was like, it's tomorrow. What are we going to do?
It's like, I own a calendar. Thank you.
For God's sakes, woman, what are we going to do? And so, I just said to him, I need Buddy there, and so that was to me, that was the piece of mom, and thankfully God love Buddy. I think they called him at 10:30 at night. His sister's family owns a restaurant. So we'll go to that restaurant.
Well, his wife's family or his sister?
No, funny. Well, I'm crying. Give me a break. His wife's family owns a restaurant. So and I do feel bad. Donald texted, it's 10:30 at night. Hey, can we come? And it's a busy restaurant, so getting a reservation isn't always easy. And then, called Buddy, and the next morning on the way to work, I called him, and he works very early in the morning. So when I'm going to work in the morning, he's, probably driving someplace. And that's a time that him and I talk a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I called him, and again, I think, when we're talking about this stuff, there is hopefully a lesson in it. I said to Buddy, I kind of need you to be there. And he was busy. And he called me back and said, I can be there. He said, I can't be there at 6, but I can be there at 6:30. So we moved the whole thing to 6:30. And that was just a flexibility, So then I was saying to you guys, okay, we're going to meet Uncle Buddy at 6:30 because that's when he can be there. And it ended up being a really, really nice evening, and it was what I needed to get through that day. That for me was hard, and I knew it, and I was just avoiding it. So I don't know if you're a spouse of somebody. I'm not sure what the advice is. I guess you keep asking, but just know that your loved one may not know what they need and may not be able to articulate it, and I guess you just be supportive in whatever way. And God love your dad. Once I said it, he was
full speed ahead. Well, and I think the lesson there is to be flexible. I think the moving it from 6 to 6:30, or calling Uncle Buddy and getting a reservation. I think Dad and I also think maybe moving forward and having a plan. Dad and I had talked almost a week before, and I had thought that maybe you would want to go to Trisha's restaurant and to be with Uncle Buddy. And, maybe we should have just done it because you could have always canceled it.
Right.
And so maybe it is making a plan and being flexible, and we could have changed it. I think it's interesting listening to you talk about your birthday. Mine was so different. So mine was a week later. And I think I had some of the benefit of, it was my brother's graduation weekend, so it was DJ's graduation weekend. So we were all in North Carolina. So I was already kind of out of my element and knew that my birthday would be different anyway.
Right.
And so Nan was almost always the first person that always called in the morning. And so, when my phone didn't ring, that was hard. But I was already kind of
first thing in the morning. No, she would have waited. Wait, I have to correct you there. She would have waited till exactly 8:00.
Oh, yes.
It was 8:01. She would call you and she probably was sitting there with her phone in her hand for 45 minutes waiting until 8:00 to call you.
Well,
she called me before 8:00, but you probably.
No, because I would have needed to sleep in until 8, but she would have thought that sleeping in later than 8 was unnecessary. So 8:01 would be, so right. Just because she would usually wake me up, that is, first thing. Because, the company that I work for, we get our birthdays off. So right. For the last couple of years, I've had my birthday off, and I usually go to a different spa in Boston. And then, so she'd call me in the morning, and then I'd usually call her afterwards, and I tell her all about the services that I got and what I did. And, if I was going out to dinner or whatever, you just shared the whole day with her. And I think for me, Nan did birthday presents a little bit different for me. Growing up, we usually would go shopping and we would go get something. And it was more about the experience of buying something than it was about whatever tangible thing she got me. I remember one year when I was in college, she took me into Burberry and bought me my first Burberry scarf. She made me keep the bag and the little thing that it comes in. She's like, that's what you store in it. And I was like, okay. I still have it. I can't get rid of it. We're talking about 8 years later. I was like, oh, okay, woman, that's what I'll do. And so you miss that phone call that she would have called and sharing your day and different things. But I think for me, I didn't even want to deal with the fact that she wasn't doing it. So I made my day as different as it could have been. But we did go to the spa. But instead of going by myself, which I usually would have done, we went with you and my sister, and actually my brother's girlfriend Liv went with us, which was really nice. And the focus was a little bit more on graduation than it was on my birthday, which was for me, that's what I wanted. And I love my birthday, and I think we both do, and we get that from her. And I think that, kind of shifting the narrative this year. But, I, a couple of days before my birthday, so I live in Boston, and I'm a huge Celtics fan. So I actually have some tickets through the year. And 2 days before my birthday, they were playing Game 5 of the first round. And so at home, and if they won, they advanced. And I was looking at tickets, and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have some freaking fun.
Right.
And so I called one of my friends, and I was like, hey, do you want to go with me? I was like, I said, I can get tickets. And I was like, I think we should do something fun. And so I knew the day was going to be hard. And so I went and had some fun for my birthday a couple of days beforehand.
Right.
And, when I think about her and what she would have wanted, she would have told me to go to the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Go, have some fun, have a beer, maybe a hot dog. And, just do what we wanted to do. And so I think, we both, even in such a short period of time, we both kind of spent those days just a little bit differently. And I think that's where grief is so hard, and it's important that people talk about it, because there's no one right way to celebrate your first birthday.
No.
And no matter what you do at the end of it, the day was hard.
It was. Well, even today when we were sitting here, it was a little bit of a hard day. It was my stepfather, her husband's birthday today, So, I think that there's all these, firsts, DJ's graduation in and of itself. There was moments of that I was just ridiculous. I was just okay, I'm going to cry because she's not here, and I just need a minute. There's nothing you can do. But so much of it was so great. But, knowing that, she so much valued education, and it was the first graduation she wasn't at, because, she fought so hard. She fought her way back after a surgery that they said she only had about 50% chance to live through, to watch DJ graduate. And my niece, Lexi, graduated from high school. And I remember talking to her about it, and she was going into the surgery, and, she just looked at me and said, I will be at that graduation. I was like, okay, then we won't have this conversation. But, yeah, so for anybody who's listening, just understanding how hard those firsts can be. And, maybe like Cortney's talking about, have a plan, do something different. And I think for us, a lot of it was different. Or articulate to people what you need. If you need to bounce out of it, not engage in what's happened, or if you need to have people around you, because for everybody that's listening, it's going to be a little different. But that's true. Even we're talking about grief after somebody's passed, but really the grief process for me started a long time ago. Grieving what she had already lost, what was taken from her by her disease, and so there was parts of her that were still her for sure.
Well, definitely.
But there was parts of her that really weren't. And I think it's important that we do a good job in supporting ourselves, in other people. And one of the things, I think, and I really wanted to be able to share on this, is actually something that I learned from Debbie Phillips through Women on Fire, which was a great organization, is still a great organization. But I remember, when you have somebody who gets a diagnosis, whatever that diagnosis is, maybe a cancer diagnosis, those types of things, or was going through something really hard. One of the things that I learned through her and or people within that group was, just to text and say, you don't need to respond, but I'm sending you love, or I'm sending whatever you want to send them, or, I'm here and I'm there for you. And I have to say that, sometimes I will do that. I've kind of made that part of who I am, and I'll often reach out to people who are going through tough times and say, hey, you don't have to respond, but here's my wish for you. And I have to say, like, that really resonated with me, because so many times when Mom was sick, or as I'm going through this grief process, people ask me how I am. Don't ask me a question. Like, don't text me, how am I? Because now I have to respond to you.
Right.
And I may not want to. And, like, I remember when Mom fell and broke her hip, and people are like, how's she doing? Well, do I need to tell you, like, she's not doing well.
Right. She was admitted to the hospital and she's having hip surgery. We don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Like,
she's not doing well. You know what I mean? Like, so don't ask me that, but I appreciate, and I know, please know, I know it comes from the right place. People are worried and they're trying to express. But I think one of the things we should be thinking about is, like, don't ask questions, just give your support. And don't make it one more task. Like, I know when Mom would be in the hospital, I can remember leaving, although some of it was because she'd say, you have to call this person and this person and this person. It's like, oh my God, I've been here all day and now you want me to talk to more people? So some of it she definitely wanted to do, but, I'd look at my phone and it would, like, blow up. And please know, I really, really appreciated everybody's concern. But then to have to sit down and respond to all those texts was hard. And to me, it was just like one more job.
Right.
And so if somebody said, hey, you don't need to respond, but I'm here for you, I actually probably responded to that text first because I didn't have to. But I think that through all of this, part of my message is you have to let people know what it is you need. But I also think we all can be a little smarter about how we support other people through caregiving and the grief process. Like, how are we there for people? And I know that, one of the other things I learned that I kind of carry with me is being very conscious of having people repeat their stories, like what's going on. All right, well, let me tell you this very traumatic story 10 times because you're the 10th person I've told it to. That's actually not really good for you. It's
right, to relive it and go through it over and over again.
Yeah, so, so I encourage people not to ask what's going on or how's it going. Now, please know, my brother had every right in the world to ask me that question.
Right.
You kids, the grandkids, had every right in the world to ask that question because you want to know what's going on with your grandmother. But I would say to you, beyond that, like a larger scope, really think about, you're really just trying to support that person. Do you need to know what's going on? You just need the person to know that you're there for them and that you support them is really what you want. And so I urge people to really kind of think about that because I think we all could do a better job in supporting each other.
And I think, when you talk about Debbie Phillips, one thing that her husband, Rob Berkeley, taught me years ago that always, I feel like, finds its way into different things is nobody can tell you how to feel.
Yes.
And I think that's really what we're talking about today is that people can control their actions, but you have a right to how you feel about what that action did. And you have a right to that feeling. And I also feel like sometimes, especially in grief, people are like, well, I'm supposed to do this or the process is supposed to look like that. That's crap.
Yeah.
It really is. There's no right way to do this, and you have a right to whatever happens in the world, however that makes you feel. Like we talk about, breaking down in the Wegmans. Like, I had a right to do that.
Right.
And so I wasn't harming anybody else. I wasn't, and there was no harm to me. But, it's honestly better for me to get that out, to express those emotions and to really feel better. And so, I urge people to, sometimes there's a power in naming the emotion. Like, what do you feel? Yeah. Putting a name on it makes it feel a lot less scary, but also just to feel it and to walk through it and to know that it's okay to tell people that, what they did made you feel a certain way. Also, I mean, I think, over the last little bit, you've really heard from my mom and I, we're not really social people. And so my dad is going to deal with this very differently. He's not going to go sit by himself. And that doesn't make what he's doing right versus what we're doing. It's just, we're just different people and we feel things in different ways. I'm much more apt to just sit on the couch with the dog and, watch a movie or something like that. And that's how I feel those feelings. And I think that's important to kind of self-identify in yourself, or when you're talking to other people, you don't owe them anything. Right. And so, the grandkids, I think, is such a good example. Lots of times you would just put us all in a group chat because you were telling us all the same thing.
Exactly.
And so technology makes that a lot easier. I mean, I know group chats are not revolutionary. It is 2025. but it is, sometimes there's just simple things of copying and pasting a text.
Well, there was times where I felt an obligation to communicate with everybody. And there's times that I would have really good intentions to talk to everybody, and I'd get through half of you, and then something would happen in my life and it would sideswipe it, and then I'd be like, oh my goodness, I didn't let that other person know. So yeah, there were times that that was a way that, and then everybody could make their own choice about how to respond to that information. Right. And I think that is important. I think the other thing, Court, I love the fact that you brought up nobody can make you, tell you how to feel. But I totally agree with that. And I think that's really important. I also think really being open to being curious why you feel that way.
Oh, I think that's a good point.
Yeah. So why is it that, that thing upset you, or why are you feeling that way? And that was what was able to get me to, I just need Buddy there. Why am I feeling that way? And so that was that, because it wasn't, because I thought, well, should we just go out? Should I just stay home and have pizza? I think if I had made the decision to stay home and have pizza, I would have been really upset the whole time. But for me, it was okay, why am I feeling this way? And I know this seems obvious, but it's that she wasn't here. And I needed a piece of her. So then how do I get that piece?
Right.
How do I get something that's close to that? And maybe it was a piece of the person who walked through this journey with me. And certainly my husband, you kids, the grandkids, but Buddy was the other person that was there. And, we laugh a lot about, mom and the ups and downs of mom, but he's definitely somebody I could call, and, we could honestly talk about the frustrations that we had in our caregiver journey, but then we could turn it around to, okay, so how do we help her?
Right.
No. Oh my gosh, she's irritating me, but how do we help her? And so he very much approached it in kind of the same manner that I did.
Well, I think that goes back to, you have a right to feel how you feel. People sometimes think about caregiving that they have to be saints and that everything is great and they're always happy to do it. Sometimes it's really freaking hard.
It is.
And sometimes they're frustrating even if they're lovely. And so, we talked a lot today about firsts and about the emotions and different things like that. But, a lot of what we talk about is having a good plan. And so, you have a plan for your emotions. Sometimes you also need a plan for caregiving, or you need a legal plan, or you need somebody to help you advocate. And so we have different resources. If you're listening to this and you're caring for people, feel free to go to theplanningandprotecting.com and find some local resources in your area about caregiving, about elder law attorneys, and different things like that. And we really appreciate you continuing to listen in and talk and listen to us talk about the ups and downs of our journey, all of the emotions, the semi-unfiltered version of what we went through. And we hope that if you're going through this with somebody else, this is something you can share with them. But if you're going through it by yourself, just know that there is a community of people that will support you in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I encourage everybody to like the podcast, leave a comment to the podcast. We'd love to know how this is helping, and you or anything else you'd like us to talk about, or topics that you'd like us to pick up.